Welcome back. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by Steve Letizia. We are here to talk about defensive tackles as we are building the board, the draft board for the Chicago Bears. I am excited about tonight. This might be the deepest position group in the draft. I mean, we're talking, I think right now we have, I think 13 starting grades on guys. And when we say that, I mean, that's like eventual starter. But first of all, I'm joined by Steve. How are you doing tonight, Steve?
Doing good. Draft is fast approaching. I feel like I'm simultaneously watching tape every single day, but also completely unprepared for the draft, which is in like a month and a half. But it's good. And D tackle, like you said, is the deepest, easily the deepest position because I was kind of ranking my guys, and like I have a guy who's 12th overall. I'm like, man, I really like that guy. So this is a fun position to talk about. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so we always want to start these shows. If you're a regular listener, you know this already. But with what the Bears have at this position group that we're talking
Mhm.
about already. So, Steve, when we're looking at the Bears defensive tackle room, and I'm pulling it up here as we go,
Mhm.
but I mean, really, we're talking about Gervon Dexter, talking about Andrew Billings, and then you got Zacch Pickens and Chris Williams from last year, and also Jonathan Ford, who played 77 snaps. Steve, how
Yeah.
are you feeling about that group right now?
Honestly, not too great to be honest. I mean, Gervon Dexter, I really love. I mean, I think he's going to be took a next step into his sophomore year. I think he's going to take a next step into next year. So he's a kind of foundational piece. Billings, obviously, you love Billings, but you got the injuries now. What was it, a torn pec, I believe he had. So and he's on the wrong side of 30. So I think he'll be back and he'll be the starter. But you got to be prepared for him to maybe not be his normal self. And then after that, no one. I mean, Zacch Pickens is a body. The other guy, Jonathan Ford, mentioned is less than a body. So I mean, they need to add to this position for sure in free agency and the draft. So uh, and it's a position we saw with the Eagles. You can't just have two guys. You don't have a starting one tech and a starting three tech. You need four guys that you feel confident about playing a majority of your snaps, minimum four guys. So there's a lot to work, a lot of room to grow on this defensive tackle position for the Bears.
Yeah, now, I mean, as you're saying, like with Billings, I do think I'm probably a bit more optimistic on his outlook because, like, I just don't think a peck matters that much for the way he plays.
Yeah,
He's shorter arms. He just wins with leverage and pure brute strength. Like, it's not like he's like when Akeem Hicks had the upper body injury. I felt like that really impacted his game because so much of his game was based on getting his paws on someone and being able
yeah,
to chuck him out of his way. With Billings, it's much more like he's just the length and the upper body power aren't really how he wins. So I'm like,
yeah.
I think he should be able to come back fine. But like you said, over 30, it's going to start deteriorating sooner than later.
And
And
he and
go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say this. I mean, I agree with you. His game is built off lower body power more than upper body for sure. But also, he plays a very physical position, like that nose tackle position. He's not the biggest nose tackle, like for a guy who's pretty good at being a nose tackle. So like that physicality, like he's gonna start wearing down soon. I think he'll be fine for this year, but I think you got to start looking for his replacement this offseason as well. Even if you're not looking to replace his starting spot.
Yeah. And so when we're talking, I mean, I think Gervon Dexter, like, you're good with him being your starter. I mean, it
Hmm.
would be great if he could be your DT3, but like,
Sure.
you're gonna have a hard time finding someone that's gonna replace it. Like, even if you go sign like a Milton Williams, I still don't know that he's necessarily starting over Dexter. Like, in my mind at least. I haven't gone and dug into
Yeah.
Milton Williams tape, but
Yeah. I think you get creative if they do go that route and say Mel Williams. Let's say I think you would get creative to try and get all three of those guys on the field at the same time a good amount because I
right.
think all three of them are pretty good players. So, but yeah, they definitely need to add to the group.
And Steve, how did you feel about Zacch Pickens 2 years ago when they drafted him?
I ashamed to say that I liked the Zacch Pickens pick, so I
Hey,
might have
you're
been
not
wrong
alone.
about
I
that.
did too.
I
So
thought he his tape at South Carolina was pretty good, and when they got him, it was at 64. Like I thought that was maybe a slight reach, but not anything crazy. I had him kind of ranked right around there. I thought his tape was really good. His tape at the Senior Bowl was really good too, a few years
mhm.
ago. So I'm surprised that he hasn't at least turned into like a serviceable player, and maybe he still can. It hasn't been that. It's not like he's going into his third year, right? So there's
Yeah.
a chance for him to like turn into at least a serviceable player, but I think they kind of he's a victim of kind of misuse. I never really saw him as a nose tackle. I saw him more as like a five. Really, I saw him more as like a five technique, which the Bears don't really utilize. But
Yeah.
what I saw him coming into the league, and when the Bears drafted him, like, okay, he's probably going to play three then, mostly three technique then. And I know the Bears like to, their three and one techniques are pretty interchangeable, but he was mostly playing the nose, which I didn't really like that for his role.
Yeah, it was almost more like role than alignment. Like,
Yeah,
because even there were times where he was at three tech, but you could see he wasn't his job wasn't to fire off the ball through the lane. It was like
right.
his job was to eat up space and try and play numbers games in that front.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like a part of me says that Zacch Pickens is one of my biggest lessons
Hmm.
at judging defensive tackle because I had him, I think, at like 68 or something around there on my board. They took him at 64. I was like, okay, the value works.
Yeah.
But his tape at South Carolina to me was like, if this guy could just let it loose, he
Hmm.
would be so good.
Yeah.
And I feel like the entire time he's been in the NFL, I'm like, why hasn't he let it loose yet? So it's like that inherent violence at the position is something that I've adjusted my scouting to being like, you
Mm.
either have that or you don't, I think is where I'm saying. That's why I brought him up because I
Yeah.
think that is for me, it's a big learning spot when I'm talking about Zacch Pickens.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, when we're talking about Dennis Allen defense, Steve, we are
Hmm.
talking about, let's see here. We are talking about players like Christian Boyd, a Brian Brzee, a Jordan Jackson, who barely even played in the league, a Sheldon Rankins, David Onyemata, and a Tyler Davison. When I say those names, like what is there any archetype that comes to your mind for what they are, or is it just kind of a grab bag? Does it feel like?
I feel like that's kind of a grab bag. I mean, I'm just like the guys I know the most of are probably Brzee and Rankins. Sheldon Rankins is more of like more shorter, kind of bowling ball kind of player than
Hmm.
Brian Brzee is more of a longer, taller guy. So I don't know. I'm not gonna pretend to be a Dennis Allen defensive expert. That's for sure. But it seems to me that that group of players you just named is it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you see one, but I don't see like a one thing that like all those guys possess that we're gonna be looking for.
No, I don't either. I mean, Christian Boyd and Sheldon Rankins probably have some similarities.
Yeah.
I mean, Anyamata and Brzee might have some, but like basically, when I've seen these names that the Saints picked when Dennis Allen was D coordinator or higher there, like it's just kind of it seems like they're just going for talent and they're going to make it work however they can make it work.
Which I think is the best way to do it. As soon as I mean, you just get good football players, which I think the Bears sometimes trying too much to get to kind of they outsmart themselves. Like,
Hmm.
let's get this guy because he can do this one specific thing. It's like, no, just get the good guy who can go do a bunch of different things because the scheme you're running now might not be the scheme you're running
Yeah.
next year and stuff like that. So just get good football players.
I mean, one thing that stands out to me, and I know as I've watched, as I've started doing draft coverage and all this, I start watching guys around the league more
Hmm.
to see to get those post evals, like, oh, I had this grade on Brian Brzee. I wonder how he's doing. So I'll
Yeah.
go watch a little Brian Brzee tape and see that, oh, the Saints have like they just run stunts like crazy now because Brian Brzee is good on stunts. And that's
Yeah.
like, okay, that's what they do now on defense.
Hmm.
So I think there's some of that with Dennis Allen is kind of evolving what works for his guys who can be difference makers.
Yeah.
Brzee's been only okay in the league, but like
Yeah.
Dennis Allen with the Saints clearly tried to do everything to make sure that he played well.
Hmm.
Now, when we're talking draft, Steve, how much draft capital do you see the Bears spending at the defensive tackle position this year?
I mean, they could draft one at 10, and that would not be crazy. I mean, they could spend a first round pick. They could spend a second round pick. They could spend two picks, even on the defensive tackle position. One because it's a need, and they need probably multiple guys, and two, it's just such a deep defensive tackle class. I almost want them to spend two picks on the guys. Maybe get a guy with one of your first three picks, and then another guy. Maybe early on day three if you pick up like a fourth rounder in a trade or something like that. Um, I think that makes all the sense in the world. It's a position that you, like I said earlier, you need 4 guys minimum to be that you can kind of rely on. You want to have that strong defensive line rotation to keep guys fresh and everything like that. So I don't think there's. I mean, maybe if you drafted 3 guys, maybe that's too many. But I really don't see a scenario where after the draft, I'm like, man, they or even after draft and free agency, and I say to myself, well, they focus too much on D tackle. I don't think that. I don't see myself saying that. So I mean, if Mason, we'll get into all the players, but if Mason Graham's there at 10, they could easily make that decision to take him.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's a because like if we're gonna assume that Zacch Pickens makes this roster,
Mm-hmm.
you got 3 guys there already, and then Chris Williams is probably like they'd like I'm sure Ryan Poles would like to keep Chris Williams if it makes sense to, but like I don't think
Yeah,
he's preventing them from drafting a guy.
I would say the same thing with Zacch Pickens. I don't think that you would if he makes the team great, but I don't think he's changing any of their plans.
Okay, so you think if they draft 2 defensive tackles, it's probably like they have no issue carrying 5 and letting Chris Williams go, or if they somehow draft 3, you think that, or sign a guy in draft 2, Zacch Pickens is like a non-factor.
I think at this point you have to consider him a non-factor and then just hope that you run into that issue and be like, oh shoot, Zacch Pickens has looked really good in training camp and preseason. We're in a tough spot. We got to make a tough cut. Maybe we'll keep 5 defensive tackles and cut elsewhere. I don't think you can expect that to happen. Would be a nice surprise if it
Right.
did. So I think you worry about get good football players, get a bunch of guys who can affect both the run and pass game, and then worry about the numbers later on. I don't see them drafting like 3 guys, so I think
Yeah.
you maybe you get 1 guy in the draft, 1 guy in free agency, or 2 guys in the draft, whatever it may be. And then maybe a lesser guy in free agency, and then you kind of just work out that out later on. But I don't see that many. I don't see a problem with carrying 5 defensive tackles.
Yeah. And if I'm being honest with it, if you're sitting there in the late rounds and there's a defensive tackle they like who might be a lighter body
Yeah,
guy, like we know how much Dennis Allen likes heavy defensive ends. You can get creative with some of that too. I think if
yeah,
you wanted to sign a guy and draft 2 defensive tackles, but one's in
yeah,
the 5th round, you're sitting there
yeah,
going like, well, this guy has fallen this far and he's a dude, like he's a dog. So let's get him. Like
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
all for that.
like I said, when with like if they do sign Milton Williams and they have Gervon Dexter and Milton Williams and Andrew Billings, like I don't think they'd have any problem playing Gervon Dexter on the edge on early downs. So
Yeah.
there's definitely things they can do to kind of work around the defensive line rotation.
Which, speaking of which, I am curious to see what Gervon Dexter's body looks like coming into this year because
Yeah.
he cut so much weight last year. It was good at 3 tech, but then when Billings went down, it's like this guy can't survive at 1 tech anymore.
Yeah.
Like he
Right.
used to have the mass to at least look like he could survive. Like now he
Mhm.
just doesn't.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure.
But let's get into some of these draft prospects here.
Yep.
And let's start off with the big name, the guy everybody knows about. We're talking about Mason Graham. Steve,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on Mason Graham?
Well, it seems like we're getting into a little bit of prospect fatigue with Mason Graham because he just kind of like in general on Twitter, obviously he didn't test at the combine. People question that. The arm length, people questioning that. And people are now like talking about him for sure being on the board for the Bears. I don't know about that. I think this is a hell of a football player. If you just turn on the tape, I mean, the guy's super strong. He's got pop in his hands. He can win in multiple ways. I mean, he's pretty much unblockable in one-on-one situations. You basically have to double team him if we're nitpicking, sometimes he can get bullied by double teams in the run game, but uh, it's not like it was so bad where it's a huge issue. That's really a nitpick. It just comes down to the physical components with Mason. You can see on the screen there. He came in he was listed what 320, weighed in at 296, arm length 32 and a quarter. He's definitely undersized in that regard. I think the weight I'm not too concerned with. I'm guessing he cut weight to work out at the combine and then just couldn't work out because I think he had a little bit of an injury. So I'm guessing he cut weight to do that and then just didn't test. So I'm guessing he probably does play closer to that 320, at least 310. Because I didn't see any issues with him in terms of power. He plays with amazing leverage. That's probably his game is more leverage based. But I think we're getting in a situation where we're overthinking him, kind of like his old teammate Aiden Hutchinson, who went second overall instead of going first overall like he should. Um, and just draft good football players, and Mason Graham's a good football player.
he is an ultimate good football player. Like
Yeah.
this dude, his love of the game just jumps off the screen. Like this dude is a
Hmm.
gamer, high motor, in your face. We want to talk about violence. This dude's about as like his intentions are as violent as they get for defensive tackle. I love the
Yeah.
tenacity that he plays with, and I mean, he's one of the four guys who right now we have a future All Pro grade on, which is that's the highest tier of grades that we give.
Hmm.
He is fourth among that group. So
Yeah.
like he's right there with, see who else we have there: Abdul Carter, Ashton Jeanty, and Travis Hunter. Those add
Yeah.
Mason Graham. Those are the four. He's that
It-
tier of prospect. If he's there at 10, you run the card up. I'm with you.
yeah.
I don't think it's happening.
I don't think it's that bad. And the other thing you like about him is not only did he put up good tape this year, but he's he stepped on the field as a true freshman and put up good tape, and then did it as a sophomore, and then did it as a junior. So this is a guy with a pedigree. Those guys who step on the field as true freshmen and compete and at a high level, those are the guys who are good pros. So I think there's definitely there's some prospect fatigue in the draft community. I don't know if there's prospect fatigue in NFL, scouting departments. So
I don't
I
think there
think he
is.
will be off the board with the Bears pick. But yeah, if he is on the board, easy selection. You just
Yeah.
run that card in.
Now the next guy is, I struggled with this guy, Derek Harmon out of Oregon, transferred from Michigan State, lost like 40 or 50 pounds in one off season to transition from basically a run stuffing nose tackle to a do it all defensive end who you could pretty much line up everywhere and
Hmm.
put up numbers doing it. Now, I struggled with his tape because there's like an inconsistency to his play style. When he lets it rip and it's in passing downs or big moments, he just moves people, right? Like he's
Hmm.
just like, get out of my way. I'm getting after the quarterback. It's what I do. But then there are points in the game where he just kind of, I don't want to say disappears, but it feels like he's trying to do things where, you know, if I weighed 360 pounds as a defensive tackle and in one offseason I cut down to 310, I'd probably be trying to figure out finesse stuff on the field too.
Yeah.
Be seeing, oh, what can I do now? This is fun. This is cool. I can move. But like,
Yeah.
I think that's what was off putting about his tape to me was those moments where it's just like, why are you doing all this stuff with your hands? Why are you trying to dance out there? Just get through the
Yeah.
guy. You can move this guy. But the fact of the matter is, in the big moments, he does it. He
Yeah.
just moves guys. He is powerful. He is big. Plays with great leverage. Good hand usage. Like
Hmm.
Steve, if I haven't stolen all the words to say, what do you see with Derek Harmon?
Yeah. No, you nailed it. I mean, yeah, I would say kind of disappears at time. I agree with what you're saying. Like it's that's tough to say, but I think that's the best way to say it. Sometimes he does disappear at times, and he does, struggle with maybe like ID and some blocking schemes and everything. But I really like Derek Harmon. I'm a huge Derek Harmon fan. Like I have him as my number two defensive tackle. I'm not sure exactly where you have him, but I like him better than Nolan and Grant, some of those guys who are kind of getting more hype. I feel like, but I think his tape at Michigan State, I watched a little bit of it, was pretty good, honestly. Like he was very stout against the run. He was a little bit heavier. I also read that he lost like 50 pounds, but I don't know if I see the loss of 50 pounds. He still looks like he's maybe carrying some extra weight, and he didn't look that much smaller to me. I don't know. Maybe I was just looking at it too quickly, but I don't know if he lost exactly that much weight. But I do know that this year he did seem much quicker off the ball, um, quick first step. He wins in a variety of different ways too. He's got a pass rush arsenal. This isn't a guy who's just winning with just athleticism. Um, he's got the length too that I love. I mean, this guy's got really good size, 6'4.5", 313, over 34-inch arms. Like he's got the whole package that you want out of a tackle. And then he goes to the combine. He only did the 40, but he runs a 4.95. Sub five at that size is pretty ridiculous. I wish he would have done some of the other drills, but maybe we'll see that at his pro day. But I really like Derek Harmon, and I think if the Bears trade back, I don't know if I'd necessarily take him at 10, but if the Bears trade back, I think he would be an option. And I think he's a guy who can play a lot of different roles. I mean, he could be a three technique. The Bears don't have a five technique, but he don't run an odd front, but he could be a 5 technique, he could be a 3 technique, he could even play some 1 technique probably. So I think he's a guy who can move around too. And I know like in the past the Bears have liked their defensive tackles to be multiple, to be able to do B3 and play multiple roles. I don't know how Dennis Allen likes to do it, but I imagine it's relatively similar, and Derek Harmon can do that. So, and I thought he was pretty good against double teams too. I didn't love his tape early on in the year. I was watching some games against like Boise State, I think it was, and I thought it was like, yeah, this guy's showing some flashes, but I don't really see the whole package. And I thought he got better as the year went on. His tape at the end of the year I thought was much better, and that's something I take into account as well. What I've started doing is, rather than just scattershot watch random games, watch games kind of in order, and I think that has helped me a little bit because you do see the growth from the start of the year to the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. And I agree with your sentiment. Like the early games were really what felt weird to me because
Mm.
he never really lost reps.
Yeah.
But it was just like, how often are you winning? And then as the season went
Yeah.
on, he was winning more and more and more. And I think that learning how to play at the lighter weight and
Mm-hmm.
what he could do and what he couldn't do and what
Yeah.
he wants to try this, but it doesn't actually work. Like I
Yeah.
think there was a whole feeling out process there. But
And also to that point, there were times like you mentioned like the finesse stuff, but there were also times where I think he tried to go to power and he has good like initial pop in his hands, but he did sometimes his bull rushes would die out a little bit. And I do wonder if that's coming from him being like, oh, I used to be 30 pounds heavier, so these bull
yeah,
rushes used to be a little bit more effective. Not that he does have good power, like he is a good bull rusher, but there were times when like sometimes it
yeah,
stalled out a little bit.
yeah. I mean, and hey, as Bears fans, you look at Derek Harmon's frame, you look at his size, you can't help but think a little bit about it. Big old Akeem Hicks.
Yeah.
Like there are some similarities there. I'm not sure he is the level of violent maniac that
Yes.
Akeem Hicks was, but
Yeah.
I comped him to Christian Barmore because that like a similar body type. It seemed
Yeah.
like it
I like that.
fit a little better. I just had a hard time putting that psychotic mentality that Hicks had on as a
Yeah.
comp. Like that's something different.
The NFL Combine guys put up the Akeem Hicks comp, and then right after that did the Chris Jones comp. So if he's a combination of Akeem Hicks and Chris Jones, like I'll take him at 10 if that's what you're getting.
Yeah. And getting into our next guy here, Lil, you mentioned him briefly. There was Walter Nolan, and I do have
Mhm.
Derek Harmon ahead of Nolan. I think Harmon, I don't think his floor or I don't think his ceiling is as high as Walter Nolan's, but I
Yeah.
think he has a higher floor. Like they're not super far apart on either, but like I think Walter Nolan has the highest floor of any D tackle in this class. But what do
Yeah.
you see on Nolan's tape?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, with just to add kind of what you said, yeah, Harmon, it's hard to envision Harmon not being at least a successful NFL player.
Oh,
With
I'm sorry, did I
Nolan,
say highest? Oh yeah.
yeah, Harmon has the
Okay.
high floor, and then Nolan, yeah, has the high ceiling. So with Harmon, it's a completely different evaluation. It's a traits-based evaluation, pretty much all the way. I was actually just watching him before this call because I have him pretty low. I would say in my rankings based on the consensus. So I was like, okay, I gotta watch him again before I start talking about him. And I kind of came away with the same sentiment. But yeah, I mean, the brute for strength and power is there. Like the guy is an animal. He is a super quick first step, great motor. He plays the game the right way in terms of just like tenacity and violence and stuff like that. So I mean, that's a great package to build around and that kind of coach a guy up. But it's the rest of the game that is just like all over the place. I mean, he just plays body to body way too much. Like he doesn't have long arms, 32 and a quarter. He's actually like very similar size to Mason Graham. Which I thought was interesting. He's more athletic than Mason Graham, but the arm length is a big
Yeah,
concern.
he looks like half the width of Mason Graham.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised. But yeah, plays body to body too much. It's just kind of a little bit out of control. I don't think he IDs run schemes very well. I don't really think he understands what the offense is trying to do. He just wants to get to a spot, which in the right off defense, could be fine. If you just have on a three tech penetrating upfield, he's perfect for that. He has great flexibility in his lower half. Like he can bend. You get that on the edge a lot, but you need bend on the in the interior as well if you want to be a good pass rusher, and he has
It's
that.
extremely valuable on the interior to
Yeah,
be able to get folded in half and keep moving. Like
yeah.
that is very important.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like I said, we hear it about the edge all the time, but I feel like we rarely talk about it with the interior guys. But yeah, it's very important. The pad level gets off from time to time. I don't think he's good against double teams at all. But that's not why you're drafting him though. My thing with Nolan is, like I said, or my first sentence, he's a traits based evaluation. So I need to see the traits, and I'm curious why he did not test at the combine. It was he. I don't know if he was injured or not. Maybe he was, but that seemed like a perfect time for Walter Nolan to go and kind of cement himself as like a top 15 pick, where he's kind of being
Hmm.
projected now, and he didn't test. And if Walter Nolan doesn't test as an elite athlete, that's going to be hard to draft that guy in the first round for me personally, because that's kind of why you're drafting him, is to be an athlete. And I'm sure he would test well, but if I know you're going to test well, why didn't you test? That's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
at with him.
I don't think like for me, I would still take him in the first round. I think even if the testing was iffy, just because I've seen the bendiness, I've seen the flexibility of his body and the
Mhm.
body control, and that combined with the violence that he brings is enough for me. Because he's a maniac. Like
Yeah,
he has no issue just tossing his head in between 300 pounders and just getting crushed. Like
yeah,
there is no all gas, no brakes with Walter Nolan. Like
yeah,
you're right, as far as the way he plays, out of control, just doesn't seem to really know where he's going or why. He's just going nonstop,
yeah.
which I love and hate at the same time. Like I'm like,
Right.
I think his ceiling is super high. I think he might take 2 years to even sniff it.
Yeah,
Um, I think year one is going to be a roller coaster for him. Year
yeah,
two might see a little more consistency. And the hope here is by year three or year four, you're talking about a guy who is now becoming one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, but it's
yeah.
going to take that type of time. And I think outside of Mason Graham, he's the only guy in this like first round chatter that I'm like, he has that potential to be like, this is a top three defensive tackle in the NFL. Um,
Yeah. I would think I would put Harmon. I think Harmon does have that potential. I
okay.
think he has a lesser chance of hitting that ceiling than Nolan. But I think he has that potential. But I would say to that, like in terms of the Bears, because obviously we're talking Bears
Yeah.
now. If the Bears want Walter Nolan, they have to take him at 10 or in a trade back. They have to take him the first round. He's not lasting to the second round.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's going to be 2 years before he really gets an impact guy like that. Can the Bears afford to draft a guy in the first round and get well, maybe not no production, but have a guy who's a project like that who you might not see the dividends for a few years? I don't think so. I think they
At
would
least
take
not a defensive pick. I mean,
right.
if you're talking offensive tackle, I could be sold more quickly than I
Yeah,
could at defensive tackle. But
maybe a little bit more, but on the defensive side, I don't think that would be their gameplay at all.
well,
I
part of
feel the
that
same thing
is
about like Shamar Stewart, who's
we've
in the
got all
Odyssey
these
mix,
names
but
who can have a
yeah,
year one impact,
right.
like in this same class you can get later.
Mhm.
So it sounds to me like we're both kind of saying Walter Nolan is probably like we don't think he's going to be a target for the Bears
Yeah,
unless Poles or Dennis Allen is just in love with something.
right. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So let's move it on along to a guy who is honestly a guy who I did not expect to like in this class that much, and
Mhm.
I flipped on his tape and I did a 180 on him. Is Tyleik Williams. Now, I last year I watched him because before he decided to go back to Ohio State, and I was not really impressed with his tape. I
Mhm.
felt like he was a um, always a step an inch slow and a step late,
Yeah.
and it just didn't feel like he lived up to the billing of being a two gapping nose tackle who could take on double teams from what I saw last year.
Yeah.
And I was carrying that into my tape this year. And man, I thought I was watching a different player,
Mhm.
frankly. The growth this guy showed from last year to this year was immense. And the fact that that growth happened makes me so much higher on him just because
Yeah.
I've seen him go from step one to step two to step three here. And it's like, okay, I trust that he could play a little three tech if you need to. He if
Mhm.
in a 40 front, he can rotate side to side and be just fine. So defense aren't playing like, oh, we're gonna scan him in three tech and he'll be fine. He's a plotter. No, Tyleik Williams is
Yeah.
not a plotter, And I believe like he is 330 pounds weighed in at the combine, and
Yeah.
he looked like he normally does in my mind. Like there's a lot to like within his tape, but in my opinion. But Steve, what do you think about Tyreek?
I kind of thought the exact same thing because, like you, I watched him last year, and last year I've always felt like he was a three tech in a nose tackle's body. Like he was trying to play to finesse. So I didn't really like him going in the year. And then, yeah, same thing. I watched him this year, and I was like, this is a completely different player. Um, he had I got him with an 88.6 run defense grade this year. I know PFF's not, the end all be all, but that showed like he was a really good run defender. The guy's just naturally strong. He can anchor his double teams. He resets the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have the longest arms. He actually had a little bit shorter arms at the combine than I thought he would, only 32 inches. But I thought he kind of reset the line of scrimmage pretty well and used his extension to keep guys off his body pretty well, which is hard to do with that arm length. But I really liked him. And then he went to the combine. He didn't test at the combine, but he did the drills. And if you watch the combine, he was incredibly smooth in those drills, which was not surprising, but when you take in the fact that he was 334 pounds, it was really, really impressive. Like the hoop drill that he was doing looked just as fluid as the guys who were, sub 300 pounds. So yeah, I really like him too. I do think the questions are can he rush the passer in the NFL? I think he can. I don't know. He's never going to be an elite pass rusher, I don't think. I don't know if you need him to be. He can still push the pocket. Um, Interestingly, he seemed like he was a better pass rusher earlier in his career. And I think he was a little hurt this year, so that might have hurt his evaluation as well. Um, but I really like him. I think he would be kind of in play for the Bears in the second round there if he's still there. I think he has a chance to go round one. But I think he's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think he does have a little pass rush upside. Like
Mm-hmm.
he'll have a big burst in his first step on occasion. Like you'll
Mm-hmm.
see it, and it's like, okay, I'm not sure he can do it consistently. Just being 330 pounds, I think it takes a
Yeah.
lot out to be. I'm jumping this snap over and over and over, but like in moments, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
And with how heavy his hands are, like I know his arms are a little shorter, but man, this guy has bricks for hands,
Yeah.
and he can take control of the rep, and he can plow through guys. And his ability to torque power through his midsection, be able to turn guys, turn blocks off of where they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think there's more pass rush upside within him. I comped him to Eddie Goldman, who I think did have some pass rush upside as well.
Yeah.
I think that Eddie never became everything he could be, but he was still a really good nose tackle. And I think
Yeah.
I see a similar kind of archetype to Tyreek.
Yeah. I also wonder with him if he could maybe shed some weight. I don't know if he needs to be 334 pounds. I mean, I wonder if he can go to like 320, 325 and get a little bit of that extra juice as a pass rusher. Because I think he did show flashes, but I just don't think he can consistently be a pass rusher in the NFL at that weight. There's only one guy, Dexter Lawrence is like the only guy in the NFL who could really be a great pass rusher at that weight, and he's just a freak. So if he could come down just a little bit, I think he wouldn't. I don't know if he'd lose anything in the run game and at any of his stoutness, but I think he would maybe get a little bit extra juice. So I wonder if that's something that he would be interested in doing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Williams has to be a target for the Bears in the
Yeah.
second round. If he's there at 39, it has to be a strong consideration. But
Mhm.
next guy here, I'll let you take the lead on him. Out of Toledo, Matt Eberflus's former college. We got
Yeah.
Darius Alexander. Steve, what's going on with Alexander?
Yeah, Toledo becoming a little bit of a football NFL draft powerhouse. We had a first round pick last year, and now we got Darius Alexander, who I don't think is going to be a first round pick, but he's a really good player. Uh, I mean, this guy dominated the MAC. He looked like a man among boys, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But naturally strong, heavy hands. Yeah, the lateral agility, quickness, thick lower half. He's quick out of his stance. Sometimes he does pop up straight up out of his stance, which I don't like. But when he does fire, he's shown flashes of firing off the ball low and with good pad level. And the dude's just strong as hell. The bull rush is a weapon. And I think he's another guy who I've kind of talked about this a little bit, and I like these guys who can kind of move around the defensive line. He's what did he test? 6'4", 305 pounds with 34-inch arms. So I mean, like that's a guy who could play five technique easy. He could play three technique. Maybe he can even play some one technique for you. Like there's a lot of different alignments you can put him at, which I really like. Back to my original point, being a man among boys, he was literally a man among boys because he's 24 years old, going on 20. I think he's 25 during the season, or at least very soon. So he was a 25-year-old in the MAC. So how much weight do you put on his evaluation? I was talking to someone online, on Twitter, going back and forth a few days ago, because obviously the Bears have a very high profile, at least in the Bears community, older prospect that they drafted, Velus Jones, a few years ago, and that didn't work out. But I think Velus Jones didn't not work out because he was old. He didn't work out because he only had one good year when he was old. Darius Alexander, he had his best year this year, that is true, but has been a solid player for a few years now, for 3 years. There's also the COVID year and everything like that, which was one of his first years in college, canceled season. Obviously you don't get a lot of development there. So I think I don't have the same concerns that he's just an older guy dominating younger guys. He, like I said, he's had 3 years of PFF grades, in the 80s, at least run defense grades in the 80s. So I feel like I'm not as concerned about his age. And we just saw Braden Fiske last year, similar
Mhm.
projection. Well, very different players, but another guy who was older, who came into the NFL and contributed right away.
And
And I
who
think
spent 4 years beating up on bad competition before
yeah,
transferring to Florida State when he was 24 years old.
exactly. So I think he can have kind of the same impact, and he can do it right away. So that's another kind of appeal to him if the Bears did decide to take him, probably at 39 or 41, is you're getting a guy who's going to contribute right away, which I think is what they're looking for.
Yeah, his want to, his violence, and his power are there. And like at
Mm,
that point, I don't really defensive tackle. I don't worry that much about age.
yeah.
Like it's sure. I mean, like this guy would be a first round pick if he was 22. Let's put it
Oh
that
yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. No
so,
question.
it's not about whether he's going to at defensive tackle. If you're a little older, I get over it pretty quick as long as the draft value is okay for it. And to me, in the
Hmm.
second round, the draft value is okay for him. Like that's the proposition. You're like, he's a little older, but man, this guy's first round talent, like skill
Hmm.
wise. And man, let's just be honest. You need to be freaking insane to play defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like you are throwing your head with a hard helmet on it into 300-pound men play after play at full speed as hard as you can. Like
Yeah.
you need to be a little like just messed up in the head. I hate to put it that way, but like you do.
I agree with you.
These guys need to have a certain instinct of just there is no flight in the fight or flight for these guys
Hmm.
to succeed in the NFL. The guys who succeed in the NFL and Darius Alexander, there's no flight in that in his tape,
Hmm.
which to me goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, next guy here, I know we are both pretty high on. I'm not sure. I might actually be higher on him than you. I love Alfred Collins,
Yeah.
Texas. I think his floor is extremely high to me just because he is going to be a rock solid run defender at the least.
Hmm.
At the most, I see a moldable frame. You can pretty much turn in whatever you want with the right coaching, and that just has immense power. He's like, I see Gervon Dexter with longer arms and better technique
Hmm.
coming out of college. Like it's just I love everything about him. He fits my profile of what I want in a defensive tackle so well that it's hard to say I'm not biased on it. But
Yeah.
like Steve, where are your thoughts on Alfred Collins?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The first thing you said was you know what you're getting with Alfred Collins. It's not like I'm not picking on Walter Nolan, just it's a very different evaluation. With Walter Nolan, you can get a lot. You can kind of you could draft him and you can get a variety of different outcomes. You're gonna draft whoever drafts Alfred Collins is getting this rock solid run defender from day one. I think he's got a little bit more pass rush potential than he's shown in college. But yeah, the guy's just huge. Like he's almost 6'6", 332 pounds, almost 35-inch arms, just a prototypical defensive tackle in the NFL. And at that size, he actually moves pretty well. And the guy's just naturally strong. Heavy hands, powerful bull rush. I think he has some scheme versatility too, which again I'm going to talk about a lot because I like that. You just can't move him. You're getting a strong run defender in year one. Can he rush the passer at a high level? I think he can, or maybe at an appropriate level. I think he can. I don't think you're ever going to get a double-digit sack a year guy, but I think you're going to get a guy who can turn into a 5-6 sack a year guy and also play extremely well against the run. So I really like him too. I think another guy should be in consideration with one of those round 2 picks. My biggest, I don't know about biggest concern, but a concern I do have with him, and I heard this on a podcast the other day. He is like either a 5th year, 6th year senior. So it's not so much the age; it's Texas has churned out a lot of good defensive tackles, and Byron Murphy was a first round pick last year, and Byron Murphy was good. Byron Murphy passed Alfred Collins in the pecking order at defensive tackle, and Collins had the seniority. Collins was a senior last year. Byron Murphy was a redshirt sophomore, and he passed him. So that kind of tells you what Texas thought of those guys. I don't know if that necessarily takes something away from Alfred Collins, but I do wonder why he wasn't the starter over a redshirt sophomore. So just kind of things like that. But that's that's nitpicking. The guys are the tape is really good. So I would be all over him.
I would wager that some of that is and you wrote a sky report. You might remember this better than I do. Wasn't he a converted edge rusher?
He did play edge early on in his career. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean even
I'll give
like
it that.
his second year at Texas, he played almost all his snaps lined up over the tackle. So and maybe that was a different defensive scheme then too before Sark got there. But so he was playing essentially a 5 tech for some time there. I'm wondering if his frame was constantly kind of being changed there
Could be.
until there was some stability with what their defense was and what kind of role he was in. But it's a legit concern. It's valid.
Where do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was to say like Moro Jomo was also getting snaps over him, and that Moro Jomo's done some stuff in the league despite a 6th round draft selection, but another guy who was kind of keeping him from seeing the field. But what were you going to say there?
I was going to ask you kind of where you see his best role in the NFL, technique wise.
I want him something just like what Gervon Dexter's in my mind should be, which is a 3 technique who has the mass and the power to play a 1 technique when needed.
Yeah.
Or I might have Alfred Collins the opposite of that, the one tech version of Dexter, where it's like I can put him at 3 tech. I can also put him at edge or 5 tech when I want to, but he'll live at 1 tech.
Yeah, that's kind of what I have him as. Actually, I think his best role is going to be more that like 4-eye 5 technique. But yeah, I mean, if the Bears took him, maybe that I agree with you. 1 tech primarily who can play some 3 tech for you. But yeah, it's very interesting with him because he's such a huge frame. Like it's hard to imagine like a 6'5", 332-pound 3 technique, but I think he could potentially do it.
I mean, you make a very strong argument though, because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, man, you're telling me I can get Alfred Collins on an offensive tackle?
With 35-inch
good
arms.
luck moving that edge. Good luck stopping his bull rush. That's the thing that stood out to his tape the most for me. He still tries to rush like an edge rusher sometimes as a pass rusher, and he shouldn't.
Yeah.
Whatever coach gets his hands on him in the NFL is going to tie his hands together and be like, this is how you rush from now on. Just put your hands in their chest and go, because all this crap you're doing, stop.
Yeah, if I see one finesse move from you, you're getting benched. Run through people's faces.
Yeah, that was actually kind of frustrating in his tape when I was watching it. I was just like, I get it, but come on, man, you got to get through that guy. But okay, let's get on to this next guy here who we have a little lower on our list than the consensus, is Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. And to open this up, Jim Harbaugh once called him, quote, a gift from the gods. So Kenneth Grant is a different athlete. like
Yeah.
I don't think he tested at the combine. No, he
Mhm.
didn't. He had like an injury that squeaked up.
Yeah.
But massive frame, 330 pounds, 6'3", 33.5-inch arms. Like
Yeah.
I see it with him that what everyone loves.
Yeah.
I do. I just wish that I saw it a little more frequently, I guess. And like
Mhm.
there are ups and downs to his play that I don't love. The highs are really high and really
Yeah.
impressive. I just want to see them more consistently.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not going to go against Jim Harbaugh. If Jim Harbaugh thinks he's a gift from the gods, then I'm not going to argue with him. But yeah, I kind of what we just said about Alfred Collins, where he's plays too finesse. That's the same thing I feel about with Kenneth Grant. I feel like he's trying to he's like a 3 technique in a 1 techniques body, or even like a 0 techniques body. Like I want him to I want him to play with more power, and not that he doesn't, because he does, but there are too many times where I think he's trying to shoot gaps, and maybe that's just what he's being taught to do. But just be a 330-pound guy and just stand your ground. I don't think he holds up to double teams that well for a guy who you think when you just look at the profile, like, oh yeah, this is a guy who's gonna be really stout and hard to move. And at times, I didn't think he was that stout or hard to move, but that's the negatives. The positives are, the size and the athleticism. It's just the freakish athleticism. That's the kind of profile you kind of bet on. So I have him as my number 3 overall defensive tackle. So Graham, Harmon, and then Grant. And that's mostly based on just like the high end flashes. If you can harness those high end flashes and get them to come out more consistently, then you have, an all pro defensive tackle. If he goes to the NFL and doesn't kind of harness that, and then the flashes become less, fewer and far between, you don't really have much. So he's an interesting tape study. I did want to like him more. I wanted to have him at 2, and I watched him last year because just liked watching the big Michigan defensive tackles, and I loved him. Coming into the year, I was like, this is a guy, like, I'm gonna have him top 10 on like my board. Like, this guy's great. And then when I actually got to studying it on a down by down basis and not just looking at the flashes, it was like, it always kept you wanting a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you can when you're just looking at the highlights and the flashes, you can give a first round grade to like half a draft class, I feel
Yeah.
like. But like it's the down and down consistency that what
Mhm.
really builds the grade. And I think my biggest qualm with Grant, like you said, is the ability to take on double teams is really inconsistent because his take on technique is really inconsistent. And he's
Yeah.
not he seems almost a little indecisive at times on how he wants to take on a double team. It's like typically what I look for them just to attack one guy, right? Like if
Mhm.
there's a double team, if you can take one of them out, it's no longer a double team. Like so
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for, and I just didn't see enough of that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I
moving
agree.
on, let's get to Chicago's own out of let's see Nazareth Academy, LaGrange Park, Illinois. We got CJ West from Indiana. Steve, you turned me on to CJ West, so I'm going to let you
Yeah.
take this one.
Yeah, CJ West might be the most underrated defensive tackle in this class. He's really good. I mean, he was at Kent State for a few years, 4 years, whatever it was, transferred to Indiana and took off. Like, he actually got better after transferring to a bigger program against better competition. The guy, if you told me that, if you want to make the argument that he's the best run stuffing defensive tackle in this class, I don't know if I could argue with you. Like, he's really, really good against the run. I looked at the stats. So um, Indiana led the nation in rushing yards allowed per game, 80.2. Third in rushing yards allowed per attempt, 2.7. And CJ West had an 88.1 PFF running grade. So he kind of was the guy.
2.7.
Yeah, he kind of was the guy who was leading that charge on Indiana's defense with stop of the run. Um, so yeah, I mean, the guy's just stout. He's got heavy hands. He's powerful, thick through his lower half. Like, there's so much to like with him against the run. I do have questions. I maybe rephrase this. I had a lot of questions about, can he be a consistent pass rush threat in the NFL? Then he went to the Senior Bowl and looked really, really good. Or no, sorry, the Shrine Bowl and looked really, really good. He went to the combine and tested as an elite athlete, ran a sub 540, which I was not expecting, at 6'1", 316 pounds. So maybe he does have a little bit more pass rush ability than I usually give credit to. I saw him as more on the tape study, and I have to go back and watch him because I haven't watched him since the combine and everything. My tape study was, yeah, he has the power to kind of collapse the pocket, and he has some pass rush moves here and there. But I didn't know. I was like, I don't think he's going to be a true pass rush in the NFL. And now, based on these last two data points that I have, I think there's a possibility here. Now I got to go back to tape and just see for myself. But there's a lot to like about CJ West. I don't know how high he goes, but I think he's going to go lower than I would take him. I'd say that because I would take him pretty high.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was seeing on this guy's tape. I think he's so good. Like, I have a high second round grade on him. I don't think he's actually going to end up going that high. But
No.
like, I mean, I wouldn't if the Bears had the I don't know, 28th pick, I wouldn't be upset with them taking CJ West at 28.
Wow.
Frankly, like
That's high.
I think that highly.
I'm not mad about it, but I love that. But it is high.
I think he's so good. I just love so much of what I see on his tape. He is just an absolute dog of a football player. He is so difficult to move, single team, double team. He makes life hell on offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And he comes to play every single down. He probably played some of the most snaps among defensive tackles in the FBS this year. And he was, in my mind, he was the motor of what made that Indiana defense work.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that.
A defense that, like you said, 2.7 yards per carry. The other teams to allow stuff like that was like Ohio State, Tennessee was up there. I forget who the third one I saw that was there. They were all like, I don't want to say blue bloods, but like, they're all guys who are getting top 10 recruiting classes every year.
Yeah.
Indiana ain't, and this guy was the heart of that defense that did that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, really good. And the one of the downsides is the arm length, which is interesting because I thought when I was watching him, actually I'm looking at my scout report right now. The first bullet point I had was length and uses it well. He got 31 in it. 31.5 inch arms. That shocked me. I was like, this guy, like he keeps guys off his body really, really well for a guy who has sub 32-inch arms. So that's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, he does have short arm length, but it doesn't show up on tape. So I'm not that worried about it.
His all I would say, like with defensive tackles, I can get over arm length pretty quick because if you have burst and you have twitchy upper body movement, like his hands are fast. So that he is going to get his hands into you regardless of the shorter arms because he is bursting forward and his hands are fast and he has a hell of an anchor. So I'm not too worried about him being able to control the point against the run with shorter arms. So then it's like, I get over it pretty quick for a guy like CJ West.
It's a data point you have to mention, but for interior defensive line, not as a point man is on the edge. And like I said, if it showed up on tape, then be like, oh, that's tough. But I don't really notice it on tape, so I'm not going to really. I mean, I'm going to mention it, but I'm not going to really take too much into account.
To Scott's point, Indiana got blown out in any top 10 matchups. CJ West is one man, my friend. One man.
Only one guy.
Now, let's move this on over to TJ Sanders out of South Carolina, who, man, his tape is interesting because he was listed around 290, went in the combine at 297. Steve, does he play like a 290-pound defensive tackle?
I would say yes, but I also consider 290 pounds to be undersized. So like,
I was really impressed by his ability to win first contact and be able to hold up run blocks and say, I'm taking control of this rep now. I feel like I don't see many 290 pounders do it the way he did.
I was talking about more as like a pass rusher. I was like, he does play like a guy who's, because he has the good athleticism you'd expect as a guy who's sub 300 pounds. And I like the short area burst and lateral agility. The quick and active hands is something I noted. Really long arms too. I have long arms in my film point. It was just over 33 inches, but I feel like the arm length measurements at the combine were weird. Everyone was testing was like half an inch shorter, so I think he's probably closer to 34-inch arms. But yeah, against the run, I do thought he was more stout than, because I think he probably played at like 285 maybe
Yeah.
290 based on
Well,
kind of where he was at the Senior Bowl. So yeah, I really like him.
yeah, that's what was so shocking to me in his tape was when I saw, I'd been hearing the hype around him, and I saw his weight, and I was like, okay, I kind of have a picture in my head of what I'm gonna see,
Hmm.
and it was just very different from the run defense standpoint than what I expected to see because
Yeah.
his upper body strength to be able to use one arm to max out his length, because one arm is longer than two,
Hmm.
so to be able to max out his length, hold the guy off of him, and then toss guys was just really impressive to me as a 290 pounder. That run defense was really impressive. I'm really curious to see how that holds up in the NFL.
Yeah.
290 pounds. I do have some questions with him as far as like I thought he struggled to maintain a wide base
Hmm.
up against lateral runs, horizontal run concepts. He had a tendency to cross over his feet, which ended up getting him bowled over, and just somehow his size and power profile holds up as a three technique versus like to me I think he's a five tech like he's
Okay.
a 3-4 front defensive end in my mind because that's where I think that power profile and ability to set the edge up against offensive tackles would be really good to me. Um,
Hmm.
as like a Pittsburgh Steeler defensive end is what I
Yeah.
like. I think he would fit really cleanly as something like that. But the
Yeah.
athletic traits were good. I don't. I think I was expecting a little more. And I think some of that might just really be not so much the athletic testing as I thought he was hesitant at times on tape, and there were like pauses and like
Yeah.
times where he just seemed a little unsure about where the football was or what he should be doing in that moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can manifest as looking like a guy is not as athletic as you think. Um, Clearly 8.5 relative athletic score. He's pretty athletic, so I'd like to
Hmm.
see some of that processing kind of grow at the next
Yeah.
level.
I did see when I watched him. I did like the athleticism. 8.5 RAS score to me was actually low. I thought it was going to be higher than that. He didn't run a 40, but the explosion was there, which I understood. I actually saw the bend on tape, so I
Mhm.
was very surprised by his three cone, 7.7, which is not very good. So I was a little surprised by that. Um, but yeah, I mean the power profile is there. I do like him as a five technique, kind of as you mentioned. I do think he can play some three technique for you as well. But probably you're right. I mean, he probably is better suited for five technique with his length and his power and his hands.
Yeah,
I
I
think I
just
do
think
think
his
that makes
best bet
sense.
to be a three down football player is a
Yeah,
five technique. I guess would be the way that I see it.
I agree with that. What do you think? Obviously, if the Bears take him, he's probably gonna be playing the three technique more. So how would you feel if he's on the board and let's say, well, I don't want to say another team. Let's just say the Bears pick him. How would you feel about that?
I'd hope it's a trade down from
Mhm.
39 or 41.
Okay.
Honestly, I hope it's like mid to late second round with him. I think my grade's a little higher on him than that, but just my gut says that like I I feel burned by a South Carolina defensive tackle who seemed hesitant but was athletic,
Yeah.
and I just I feel like I see shades of Zacch Pickens in his tape.
There. I was just gonna say that. Yeah. The project the measurables and everything and the play style is all very similar to Zach Pickens.
I
But
think he's
I
more
think he's
violent.
better than I think he's gonna
Yeah,
yeah I think he's gonna be better than Zach Pickens. But yeah,
his
maybe
hands
I'm
are
a little hesitant.
relentless, and that's the
Yeah.
difference between him and Zacch Pickens to me. But the hesitancy, it just scares me when I see
Yeah.
hesitant football players.
That's fair.
All right, so next guy here we have is out of Florida State, Joshua Farmer, and this young man has life has put him through the ringer. Like I was writing up his scouting report the other day, and I was like, I'd heard stuff about his background being like, difficult, and that like he really had to persevere through a lot, but I didn't know the details. Like, so his dad, when he was 2 years old, died after a stomach
Oh damn.
surgery when a medical device was left in his body,
Mm,
and he bled out.
terrible.
And then when he was 11 years old, his mother died of an aneurysm going into a coma right in front of him.
Damn.
and like a week later, she passed away in the hospital. So, one of 7 siblings, youngest of 7 siblings, was raised by his siblings and grandparents. Was an edge rusher, well, was a linebacker in high school, converted to edge rusher late in high school, then converted to defensive tackle at Florida State. Long arms, 35 inches, 305. I think he plays above his weight, 6'3". This guy he looks the part. Like he is just so big, strong. Like you look at him, you go, that guy plays defensive tackle. Like he's massive. I mean, I compared him to. I had a hard time with this comparison because the first time I watched his tape, I saw the power and I went, "Oh man, that looks like Keanu Benton."
Oh,
I don't think he is the run stuffer that Benton is, but I did end up comping him to Benton because it was the best I could come up with. Like he has some bend to his game, he has some insane power to his game, and some ability to just say, "The rep's over. I am forklifting you into the quarterback right now," and I think that he is going to be a 3-tech in the NFL. I think he needs to enhance his pass rush toolbox. I don't think he has enough going for him right now, which is why I think he's going to be like a mid to late second round pick. But I think his talent is really high and the traits are really strong. And he's inherently violent on the football field and is not scared to just overpower people. And he has the strength to do it.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the guys who I was going through my rankings. I have him at 10. The 10th overall D tackle, and I was like, that's way too low. I got to move him up. And then I was looking at the guys ahead of him, and I was like, man, this is such a deep defensive tackle class.
It really is.
Like, it's insane. Like, because this guy's really good. He has no business being a 10th overall defensive tackle, and that could change. He might go up to like 8 or something like that, but that could definitely change. But when you hear the term heavy hands, I think it was that was made for Joshua Farmer. Like the dude has serious pop in his hands right off the get-go. Like he like the offensive lineman's like it's a noticeable jolt backwards when he hits them. Like, and that's something that translates really well. When you have that noticeable jolt like that. So the power that he plays with is really, really good. 35-inch arms, and that was at the combine that I just said. I think their measurements were off on the arm length, so it's possible they're even longer. Interesting that you have him as a 3 technique. I had him as more as like a 5 tech. Maybe even like a nose tackle because I thought he played with really good power. But he's another guy. I think he could probably thrive in any. If you put him at a 3 technique, he could probably do it. If you put him at 1 technique, he could probably do it. If you put him at 5 technique, he could probably do it. Just let him kind of go because I think he is kind of a little bit of a moldable ball of clay, a little bit. But that's interesting that you had him at 3 technique. I do have to watch him again, so maybe I'll go back and I'll come away with the same takeaway. I do think he kind of lost some weight at the combine to test well, and he didn't test as well as I thought he would, but he didn't test bad by any means. But I think he's a really good player though, and like I said, I do need to go back and watch him again. But there's a lot to like with Joshua Farmer.
So in my draft profile, I didn't have 3. I just had versatile interior defender. I'm with you. I think he can kind of go almost wherever he needs to, and is pretty moldable. With his combine, the one elite trait he had was broad jump. Rod Marinelli is on record saying broad jump is all that matters for a 3 technique. So that's kind of part of my process here. Like I know he has the burst. If I get those heavy hands at 3 technique with that burst, I trust him in run defense. And I trust that I can develop him into a good pass rusher because of that burst.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at a picture of him right now. Like the dude's arms are like as big as my thighs. Like dude's arms are gigantic. Like, the guy is so powerful. Like what year is he? Because how is he like a 5th year or is he?
I couldn't find his age, but he's a redshirt junior.
Right. So okay. Yeah. No, he's not old. Okay. Yeah. Because I just was curious because I couldn't remember. But yeah, I think like if the Bears picked him at 41, I'd be like, okay, that's a little bit high, but I don't think it would be that crazy, Like if you get him at 72, that's amazing. I think there's a possibility he is there at 72. But there's really a lot to like about Joshua Farmer. I'm really intrigued by him.
I said in my Sky report, you could talk me into him at 41. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think you could talk me into TJ Sanders at 41, but you could talk me into Josh Farmer at 41 because I believe in the character.
Mhm.
Like not that TJ Sanders has bad character or anything. Like, there's nothing out there like that. But
Yeah.
I just believe in Josh Farmer's character so strongly after reading so much up about him and his background that I'm like, yeah, okay, I think that pick's gonna work out. Like, there's a few quotes I put in here, like when he transferred high schools to try to get to a higher level high school where he could get more exposure. He transferred to a school that didn't win a single game the year before he got there.
Yeah.
Next year they go 5-5. The year after they go 6-2. The recruiting coordinator at that school has a quote of his work ethic fueled the whole team. It made everybody start working the way Josh was working. And then at Florida State, Braden Fisk said last year, Josh, he gets better every single game, every single practice. He gets better. Like, I'm just sold on who this guy is as a person.
Yeah. I did not know any of that, so that's awesome. I definitely need to go watch him again. I do have TJ Sanders ahead of him right now, mostly just because I see more pass rush potential
Yeah,
with Sanders, and I value that more. But I don't think even like I had Sanders at like 7 or 8 in my and Farmer at 10. Like I don't think there's that big of a difference between them even right now. So it's possible I go back and watch them again and move that around a little bit, but. Um, there's so many good D tackles in this
I
class, man.
know.
Like it's so hard. This is such a hard ranking these defensive tackles. I've gone back and forth so
It's
many
rough.
times.
It's rough.
Yeah, it's
But
tough.
so I got to wax poetic about Josh Farmer. Now's your chance to wax poetic out of Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, Steve.
Yeah, Jordan Phillips is interesting because he's a redshirt sophomore. Uh, no one kind of expected him to declare for the draft, but he did. And the production is not there. He has 0 sacks in his 3 year career, 2 years as kind of a with meaningful snaps, I guess I'll say. But I think there's a lot to like about him. He's, we're talking about probably more of like a day 3 guy now, below all the guys we've previously talked about. But I think there's a lot to like there. I think he's decently athletic. His combine was poor, which I was a little disappointed by. I thought he would test a little bit better, but he is, very stout against the run. Uh, uh, holds up against double teams well. Um, he has big hands. He doesn't have long arms, but he has big hands. So when he gets his hands on you, he can kind of control the rep. Heavy hands, really thick lower body. Like this is gonna sound weird, but the dude has an ass to him. Like he's like he's all lower body,
Noticeable.
noticeable ass. So like I take that into account because that's so I think when you talk about multiple balls of clay, I think Jordan Phillips is that guy. Kind of like what we talked about earlier. He's not going to be a guy who you want to really play a lot this first year, but get him with a good defensive coordinator, good defensive line coach. Teach him up a little bit. He's so young. He's only 20 years old. He's going to be one of the youngest players in this draft class, and I think there is a lot there to like. And the dude's just naturally strong. He had 29 bench reps at the combine, 312 pounds, 6'2", 312 pounds with 29 bench reps. I Shulka kind of would have placed him. I think I'm going to end up with. I thought pre-combine, I was like, maybe he could play some 3 technique. I think he's just going to be more of a nose tackle, especially with those shorter arms. Um, the other thing about his RAS score, I was looking at this up earlier because I was looking at his RAS score. I was like, that can't be right. Like he looks more athletic than that on tape. He has an 8.19-second 3-cone drill, and I looked that up for defensive tackles. That's about that's the slowest ever 3-cone drill by a defensive tackle was like 7.8 seconds. So either I don't know what happened. I'm guessing he fell like twice. It had to be because there's no way he ran a 3-cone that slow. So I think that's affecting his score a little bit. So I'm hoping he goes to his pro day and kind of fixes that a little bit because I do think there was more athleticism potential than his combine showed.
Yeah, I mean there were guys falling on that turf.
Yeah, that had to be
So
what it is.
yeah, but I mean yeah, I think I don't have a ton to add on Jordan Phillips. The dude is just a built like a brick shit house. Like
Yeah,
he's just power. He is power.
yeah,
Like there's a lot of technique and fine details that he needs to work out in his game, but that power will play. Like
yeah.
it's fun. Now, next guy that we have here, is Omar Norman Lott, who weighed in at 291 pounds but did not test. So I would wager that's probably about as heavy as he can reasonably get.
Yeah.
And because I think he played around like 275 last year, probably. But his burst is insane. Like he has the best first step of anyone in this class, as far as I'm concerned. And he is, if you are looking for a one, I mean, he could probably play some 5 tech, but I don't know that I really want him there because run defense isn't his thing. He's barely played run defense in his life or in his college career, I should say. So like to me, he is your like DeMarcus Walker type rotational 3 tech who, might play some rushing downs here and there, but it's going to be years down the road before I'm trusting him to play many rushing downs. But Steve, what are your thoughts on Norman Lott?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's the explosive first step is the first thing you notice. It's noticeably quicker than everyone else. The explosion out of his stance. Because of that, like I wouldn't say he's a power guy because he's a little undersized, but because he's so explosive out of his stance, he converts that explosion into power very well. He's got longer arms, almost 34-inch arms, so he can keep guys off of him. Really quick and active hands too, and pop in his hands, which I really like. The motor's there. He's constantly running around. The thing with Omar Norman Lott, that all sounds great because I think he can be a good pass rusher in the NFL. Is like you said, he's not really good against the run at all. I think he's kind of a liability, I would say, against the run. So are you getting a situational pass rusher on the interior, which is fine, that will work. But he also, I mean, watching Tennessee games, like you could watch an Omar Norman Lott game in 5 minutes because you only have to watch 20 snaps because he's the Tennessee. It's just the way they do it. They just do full hockey line rotations on the defensive line. It's the same thing with James Pierce. The guys just don't play as that many snaps. There's just not that many snaps to evaluate with these guys, especially Omar Norman Lott, who's pretty much in a reserve role. So I think he's a situational pass rusher as a 3 technique. Maybe, like you said, maybe he could play a little 5. Maybe he could play a little bit on the edge on early downs. Maybe that'll help him with his run defense. But I think he's kind of just a guy you bring in off the bench to bring you some juice on an obvious passing situations. But I think he can do that at a pretty high level. So even though you are only getting a situational pass rusher, you could potentially be getting a very good one. So it's hard for me to rank because of all that. Because how high do you value that over a guy who can maybe play all 3 downs, but isn't going to bring that high level trait, that one calling card that Omar Norman Lott has? That's why I'm kind of struggling to rank him.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. Like, I don't know how to value him as like the versatility aspect is obviously going to be lower, but like he is such an impressive pass rush aspect that I just it's going to be team by team. It's going to be team like
he'll be off
every team will
boards.
see him very differently.
He'll be off teams boards. I wouldn't be surprised. Just not for anything off the field, just because of his profile. Undersized. He's not going to go to an. Well, I guess he could go to an out front, but I really just see him as a 3 technique kind of only. That's how I view him, at least. Yeah. It would not surprise me to see him, even though I have him I think I had like a top 75 grade on him or something or whatever it was. It would not actually surprise me to see him on day 3.
And like a Michael Hall.
Yeah.
Last year, like he ended up being like early 4th, or the year before there was another guy who was similar, who he just went further down, and it's like a guy like Braden Fisk was a good pass rusher and had some similar measurables here. I think
another we kind of mentioned earlier, Moro Jomo, similar kind of role there. He went like 6th round or whatever it was. And
that one was so weird.
Player. That one he should have gone higher than that, but day 3, like kind of, I don't know. I don't really remember his game all too well. I've got to remember just bits and pieces, but kind of a similar guy. If I remember correctly, I could be
wrong. I just remember having like a 3rd round grade on Ojomo and being like, why is he still there?
It made no sense.
But one thing that is weird to me with Omar Norman Lott, and okay, I guess he played 13 snaps of Ohio State's of the Ohio State college football playoff game. I didn't think he played at all. There were like I could have sworn there were pictures of him on the sideline out of uniform, like, but there was never an injury that came out. Like, I don't know. That has all
PFF
sat
has
weird
been,
with me.
yeah, PFF has been weird. They might be. I've noticed some discrepancy in PFF data this year, especially in snaps.
Well,
Snaps
even
played.
if he did play, it's like he probably played 13 snaps in the first half and then didn't play in
Sure.
the second. But like, still, it's the playoff. You
Yeah,
know, why are you only playing 13 snaps, even if it's a coach's decision?
right.
You are one of the best players on this defense.
Yeah,
Why are you
yeah, I
not
agree.
trusted to play? Like
I agree.
that doesn't sit great with me.
Yep. Yeah, I
Now,
mean, part of it is definitely the Tennessee's just that's kind of what they do. But like, yeah, you're totally right. Like at some point, you just got to get your best players on the field. And why you should have been you should put yourself into a situation where the coaches can't take you off the field.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, second to last guy we have here is a guy who I loved early in the process here.
Hmm.
I fell in love with his tape immediately. Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia
Yeah.
Tech, played at Duke prior to that. I mean, this guy's the Tasmanian Devil. I comped him to Braden Fisk. He did not
Yeah.
test like Braden Fisk, so that needs to be tempered down a little. But his
Right.
tape reminds me of him a lot, with just the reckless abandon for his health and everyone's health around him. He is hell or high water gonna make someone pay for
Yeah.
playing football against him. Like, I love that attitude. I love the way he plays the game. He's light, 282 pounds. He did test at 282, 7.16 RAS. I mean, his
Mm.
10-yard split came in like average, or not like above average range, but like a 7.6 RAS there. The broad
Yeah.
was at 7.6. So he was probably playing at like, I don't know, maybe 270 last year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that works in the NFL. I just know that I love his attitude and the way he plays the game. And I think that you will find a spot for him on a football field. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if he's going to go top 100 anymore with
No.
282 in that RAS score, but I do think he's just a gamer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, the again, explosive first step, which is kind of what I'm first looking for. We're watching like a D tackle, like he's quick out of his stance. Again, undersized, but it is explosive. He's got a lethal spin move. He whipped it out a bunch of times and won with it a lot. It's so that was he's just really fun to watch. Lateral agility, quickness,
Which,
quick hands, spin move. As I mentioned, I thought he was a better run defender than I
yeah,
expected to see when I started watching him. You know, because I knew he was undersized. I was like, okay, this is gonna be like just a fun watch. And I thought he actually was a kind of a decent run defender. I don't think he's going to be a great run defender in the pros. It's just he's just not big enough.
he's gonna be
I
a
actually
Kalijah Cansey type run defender.
yeah, well, that's kind of what I was actually just gonna say. Like he when he weighed in, you know, under 6'1", 282 pounds, I was like, hey, that's the exact same size that Kalijah Cansey was. Like maybe this guy, I thought he was gonna be 270 and be like, what am I gonna do with that? But I was like, okay, same size as Kalijah Cansey. Let's see how he tests. Like if like maybe this guy, you know, can be like a full-time player, or at least, you know, a Kalijah Cansey type. And then yeah, did not test nearly as well as Kalijah Cansey. I have their side by side here. Like Kalijah Cansey 9.63 RAS score, 7.16 for Peebles. You know, he ran a 4.67. Peebles ran a 4.94. Like there's and so on. There's a huge difference in their athleticism. So that kind of soured me on him a little bit. Like I thought maybe he had a chance, but he still has a chance. But I thought he could be like, you know, maybe an elite pass rusher. Now I think he can maybe just be like a rotational guy. But he's really fun to watch, and I would take him on day 3, which he is where he will go, and I would take a flyer on him. He's kind of like the defensive. Oh man, I'm blanking on the right guard from North Carolina's name.
Lampkin.
Yeah,
Right?
he's the defensive Willie Lampkin. Like he's just undersized, but he plays much bigger than his size. And like if he was 20 pounds heavier, he'd be like a day 2 pick easy. But it just is what it is.
Yeah, just as we're talking through this, I'm like, man, I got to knock down his ceiling a little. I got to knock down his floor some, and he knock down his versatility. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, that sucks. I like him a lot.
He's
I still have a
he's really fun to
third
watch.
round grade on him on this, but I'll
Yeah, I
probably
don't know
adjust
about
that a little
that.
more. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's gonna go that high.
No, he's really fun to watch. If anyone likes to watch draft prospects and watch the L22 and stuff, like still watch them because it's fun. So you got that going for you.
All right, so Moving on to our final guy here is Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon. And Steve, I'll let you start off this one.
Yeah, I really like Caldwell. So I actually watched Caldwell last year because they're like Jim Nagy tweeted about him about going to the Senior Bowl. So I was like, okay, this is a guy I got to watch. And then he ended up not declaring. He played on the he played like 5 technique, even some on like outside the tackle at Houston is where he was. And the guy, I mean, he was listed at like 330 pounds, and the guy was coming off the edge hot. Like he was moving, and I was like, this is strange, but like I like it. And then I watched him this year very early on because I was like, okay, he was on my radar last year. I'm gonna take a look, and they transferred to Oregon, play and settled in more of that 0-1 technique. And man, that was exactly what he needed because now he's playing a more natural position, and his tape is really, really good. I think he is a space eater. He takes up a lot of blocks, but I think he's a little bit more than that. He does anchor very well versus double teams, but he also is, at least from the tape, I thought he had rare quickness for his size. Like the guy's 6'2", 332 pounds, but he is very quick off the ball, quicker and more explosive, I would say, than guys who are, some of the guys we've talked about who are closer to 300 pounds. Makes plays up and down the line. This is not just a 0 technique space eater. Low center of gravity, really good with his leverage. But then he did go to the combine and did not test well. 4.27 RAS score, which he is a nose tackle, so I don't really care that much about it, but it is lower than what I expected based on the tape. I do, because I thought he had that rare quickness for his size. I think he has more pass rush potential than a typical nose tackle would. I do have questions about his conditioning as a little bit. He is, I would describe him as having bad weight on him. But his pad level can rise at time. Does have shorter than average arms, 32 inches, but that's not a huge deal as we discussed on the interior. But I still think he's a really good player and really good nose tackle. I think his ceiling's maybe capped a little bit more than I initially thought. But I still think he's a really good player, a guy who can come in and be a run stuffer early on in his career. I don't know. I think he can play 1 technique for you. I think teams are going to draft him to be more of a 0 technique. But I think he could probably play a little bit of 3 technique as well. I think if you're a team that likes Kenneth Grant and misses out on him, then Jamari Caldwell is going to be like, okay, we're going to go get Jamari Caldwell 2 rounds later or whatever it's going to be. Because I think they have similar profiles, I would say. And I really like Jamari Caldwell. I wish he tested a little bit better, but I still like him.
Yeah, I was conflicted on him because my overall film grade for him isn't that good, but I like him more than that. And it's what it comes down to when I break up my film grades between 50% run defense, or not 50%. It's however much the ratio of pass run that they played but on running downs, I have a very high grade on his tape, which for a nose tackle is what I care more about anyways, right? Like, he is a very good run stuffer in my mind. That leverage really plays for him. He's got plenty of power. Like, especially you're telling me this guy was playing edge before and he's playing nose tackle like this against the run. I'm pretty impressed by that.
Yeah.
I hated his pass rush tape.
Okay.
I see it. I see the upside. I see the pass rush upside you're talking about. I see the physical traits. I just hate how he uses them right now. I just want a coach to grab him and be like, "You're not playing on the edge anymore." Yeah. Like, because there are almost moments where I felt like his feet were standing still and he's like waving his hands around. He's not going anywhere, and like that.
No, I can see that.
Nothing will infuriate me more from a nose tackle.
Yeah,
but that's not anything about his draft prospects though, because that means I actually really like his pass rush upside.
Yeah, there's room for growth there for sure. I thought he was a better run defender and held up better against double teams than Kenneth Grant did. Because again, I'm talking about them just because they're similar profiles. So I thought he was a better run defender than Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant gives you a lot more, I think, as a pass rusher right now, and has more athleticism. So I'm not saying that I'm not comparing the two players. Just saying that they have similar projections. You can get one in the first round, or you can get one in the 3rd or 4th round. So it's kind of just like how you value that. But I do think he has pass rush potential, like you said. It's just he's probably not going to be a pass rusher right away. but he can come in right away and be a defense, a run stuffer who can maybe develop into a passer. I mean, kind of look at Andrew Billings. Like Andrew Billings early on in his career was only a run stuffer. That's all he did. And now he's kind of developed into a decent pass rusher for the Bears. Obviously, he's known for his run defense still, and will always be known for his run defense. But he's got some pass rush moves. And I think that's kind of what Jamar Caldwell might be. It might take him 8 years to get there, but he could get there potentially.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's some pass rush juice there that hasn't been tapped into yet, and learning how to play his power profile at the nose spot goes a long way. And truly, I mean, when I'm sitting here saying similar things about the pass rush from Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, both at Oregon, both playing kind of newer roles to themselves, I have to question a little bit how much of that was coaching telling them to do that. Like, they ran so many stunts and so much misdirection on their D line that some of it was smoke and mirrors, and waving your hands around helps with smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But, and I just adjusted my grades down to, I still have JJ Pegas over Aeneas Peebles now, but he's an interesting one to watch if you haven't. I'm not going to add him because we've already gone over here. But Steve,
keep going. Let's go 4 hours.
I mean, at this class we might be able to. But Steve, any other guys that you wanted to throw a shout out to before we close this thing out?
I got one more guy I'll shout out. Just keep it to that because we were going really long. But Elijah Roberts from SMU, he plays on the edge at SMU, but I think he's going to have to play on the interior in the NFL. He's like 6'3", 290 pounds. I don't have his measures in front of me, but it's kind of that profile. So it might be more of like a 5 tech, maybe a 3 tech. But I think there's some pass rush potential there. So I think he's a guy to at least keep an eye on day 3. A little bit fun to watch too.
Yeah, and I'm gonna shout out Cameron Jackson out of Florida. Florida has a type at defensive tackle. I'm not talking about the like 450-pound dude who used to be there. I'm talking about Gervon Dexter. Florida goes after these dudes who are just like massive people eaters who can just destroy your soul.
Yeah.
And Cameron Jackson kind of fits a similar profile. He didn't test well athletically at the combine, but I think he has a bendy frame and some nice athletic traits and just a super sized frame. That is just like, this dude has Mack truck power, and I'm interested in it. I think it's a mid-day 3 pick, but like, man, I liked a lot of the potential that I saw from him.
Sure.
But all right, let's close this thing up. Hopefully we see the Bears maybe make a move in free agency here, but I honestly just want 2 rookie D tackles from this class. It's so damn good. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, listening to us. Hope you have a great evening. And Steve, why don't we get out of here with a good old bear down?
Bear down.
Bear down.